Having heard Australia's dispatch from the front line in Julie's own words, and having followed the panel this morning, which really also dived into the topic of age verification and safety by design, there is another aspect of the equation, which is digital literacy, and that will be the thing that we're discussing today, something that we can understand really as the ability and knowledge for people of all ages, but in particular children, to use the internet and technologies more broadly, safely and responsibly. Parts that are very important in this respect are, of course, education. You know, there's a role for industry to play, there's a role for parents to play, there's a role for governments to play in school. And here to talk us through what is important in this debate are my panelists, which I will introduce in turn. So joining me on my right is June Lowry Kingston, who you've heard from this morning already. She's the head of Unit Accessibility, Multilingualism and Safer Internet at DG Connect. Joining us virtually on your screen on the left and right is Alexandra Evans. She's the head of Safety and Public Policy Europe at TikTok. On my left is Anna Rozinska. She's the head of the digital education team and the coordinator of the Polish Safer Internet Center. There on my right is Anne Becker. She is the head of policy and public affairs at the Interactive Software Federation Europe. And on the left, in our last panelist, is Hans Martens, the head of the digital citizenship department at European Schoolnet. We'll start today's panel with, I will just give everyone an opportunity to give a few introductory remarks, and then we'll have a debate afterwards. I'd like you all in the room, if you have a question, please do, raise your hand, and then we can handle. And for those of you joining us virtually, please submit your questions in the chat. And June, with this, I'd like to hand over to you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me. And hello to everyone online as well as everyone in the room. Again, sorry you're stuck with me for one more panel. So, skills. I'm going to talk about two approaches from across the Commission, and then obviously we'll see how the discussion develops. And I'm delighted to be joined with two of my really colleagues who do all the hard work for us in terms of safer internet implementation of our policy. So Hans Martens and Anna Rybczynska, whose name I've almost certainly got wrong, so I apologise. I'm going to talk a little bit at first about not all the things, some of the things that the Commission is doing on digital literacy and media literacy in general, and then talk about what we're doing for children specifically. Now, I do have a little bit of paper because I'm not an expert on the whole stuff, and there is so much stuff going on in terms of digital and media literacy across the Commission, or at least across the bits of the Commission that I know of. So, digital and media literacy is mentioned in no less than 3 action plans from the Commission. We have the EU Democracy Action Plan, which looks particularly at disinformation, because obviously that is a key strategic threat, and this was also something that cropped up in the conference on the future of Europe, and also is a responsibility of Commissioner Šuica, as we heard this morning. We have the Media and Audiovisual Action Plan, and we have the Digital Education Action Plan, which is looking at creating common guidelines for teachers in teaching digital literacy and media literacy skills. Education, of course, being the prime responsibility of the member states, but again, where the Commission is helping this exchange of best practice and knowledge and successful initiatives. In the AVMSD itself, of course, we have obligations on both member states and on industry to develop relevant tools and resources and to promote those. And in implementing the AVMSD, we have, of course, the network of regulatory bodies, ERGA, and they are working with the Commission to produce, I think this year still, a media literacy toolbox. And then ERGA itself has working groups who are looking at some of these topics in detail, such as the actions of vloggers, for example. We also, again, have pilot projects and some funding. So there's funding under Creative Europe for media literacy skills. And there has been a very successful, I understand, pilot project that actually resulted in 18 mini projects under the heading of Media Literacy for All. We have Media Literacy Week in the EU. So there is a lot going on. And this is something really seen as being important for the Commission and important for the member states, because of the threat of disinformation, of people recognizing deep fakes, of the division that can be created through this if we don't have critical thinking and awareness of the different types of digital information that is being offered to us or pushed to us as adults. Now looking to what we do through my unit in terms of what the skills that we look to give to children and where the big strategy comes in. So as I mentioned earlier, we have 3 pillars in the big strategy: protection, which we talked about, creating that age-appropriate environment, then empowerment. How can we give children the skills, the knowledge, the competences and ability, that the sense of judgment that they need to go on to be competent and confident digital adults, which we desperately need as Europe. Whether or not they go on to be ICT professionals a lot, as we've heard, their life already, abstinence is not an option when it comes to the online life, and that will certainly be the case for their life as adults. And we need to have those skills really honed. What we heard a lot in the consultation with Hans and his partners, so wonderfully conducted last summer, was that children are looking for support. They want to be taught by teachers as well as by parents and others, but they know that the teachers themselves need teaching. And this is one reason why these general initiatives that I've mentioned are so important, especially in the area of formal education. What we do with the Safer Internet Centres, and you will hear firsthand what a brilliant job they do, is really look at the whole package of skills that children need, which includes this critical thinking, but also, if they get in trouble, how do they report? What do they, sextortion being a risk, all these other awareness-raising information that is shared with children. And through the Safer Internet Centres, we can act agilely, we can react to crises, as you will hear, and we also can use our Better Internet for Kids youth ambassadors, which reflects the 3rd pillar in the strategy, is respect for young people and involving them in shaping the digital environment, because they know what they want. They know where the gaps are, and they can really inform us as adults, whether policymakers or teachers or parents, as to what they need to know. I had a brilliant presentation by one of our Better Internet for Kids youth ambassadors last week, really saying, this and this and this is what needs to be taught. What's disinformation? What's misinformation? What's product placement? What's targeted advertising? What's personal opinion? This should be standard for everyone, she was saying. And that was a much more eloquent and authentic expression of those needs than anything I could say. And certainly anyone of my age, I would probably say, don't speak for all my age group, but I'm sure there are more intelligent ones than me. So with our Safer Internet Centres, we want to really leverage this sort of peer-to-peer type training, getting that voice of youth involved in the training, encouraging intergenerational training, kids training, explaining to parents and to other adults what's important, so that we can have this mutual learning. And also that one thing that Commissioner Sreetzer mentioned this morning is the aspect of inclusion. Now, digital divide compared to digital inclusion. Digital divide, connectivity, access to devices, access to digitally equipped schools, but also access to digital skills. And not all children are in the fortunate position of being able to turn to their parents or to a trusted adult. There are children in refugee situations, in situations of poverty, children in care, children with disabilities who can't always access the same resources that are made available. And this is an area that we're going to be asking our Safer Internet Centres to look at more closely in the future. So that's a very quick whistle-stop view of what the Commission is up to, what we're up to under the big strategy, and I'm very happy to take questions afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you very much, June. Very, very comprehensive and very interesting. Alexandra, I'd like to turn to you next. It's really great that you can be here with us virtually. TikTok has proposed a number of industry-leading initiatives to ensure its users' digital well-being, and I'd like to ask you to tell us a bit more about TikTok's approach to digital literacy and which initiatives you're taking in this respect.
Of course. And thank you so much for having me. And I hope that you can hear me. You're nodding your head. So hopefully
Yes.
that means that I'm coming through loud and clear from London. I'm really sorry that I can't be there in person. I'm at a Europe-wide offsite, and for that we've chosen London slightly perversely as our location. So we are all gathered in London, and I'm sorry that I can't be there sitting on the panel, but really delighted to have the opportunity to hear from June and others, but also to speak a bit about TikTok's approach to digital literacy. I think the first thing that I would say is that our strategy around digital literacy, though holistic, thoughtful, and we hope creative, is absolutely not a substitute for designing an inherently safe platform. We absolutely understand that we have a responsibility to ensure that our platform is safe for all of our users, but particularly through age-appropriate design and safety by design, appropriate for our younger users. So we think really carefully about the developmental capacities of our young people, and we design our service and restrict some access to our services based on what we know a young person can or can't, what we can or can't expect of a young person, dependent on their age and capacities. And I think that that's quite a useful way of thinking about digital literacy. You know, childhood is a journey from infancy to adulthood. From TikTok's point of view, we have some fundamentals. We obviously have a safety center where we provide really quite comprehensive advice, both to young people, to parents, and any stakeholder who's interested in learning more about our safety tools and features, or otherwise simply from a topics basis, somebody who wants to do a deep dive into issues around, for example, eating disorders or online challenges. And we also, of course, work with Safer Internet Centres and other NGOs all across Europe, because we know that whilst some people will come to TikTok for digital literacy advice, I think it's really important to acknowledge that there is a trust deficit and that some people may prefer to get their advice from trusted third parties. So we're really committed to working with NGOs who we know are places that parents, young people, and those teachers that Jean mentioned are very likely to go to try and get a sort of objective opinion on our platform. But then on platform, we beyond delivering our messages through those trusted third parties and making sure that we fulfill the sort of what I would call like a baseline around media literacy, I think that our priorities are as follows. The first is that we want to be more thoughtful about surfacing information. We know that teenagers are busy people, that developmentally they are not prone to proactive consideration of long-term consequences of their actions, and that we may be asking a little much of them if we expect them all to read through our safety centre before starting their TikTok journey. So we want to make sure that we are there where they are in their user journey, and that we are popping up, hopefully in a way that's frictionless and is doesn't interrupt their journey and is sort of typically TikTokish, but is actually making an additional effort to capitalize on potential teachable moments. So examples of that would be that we will, in relation to Blackout Challenge, for example, we did an awful lot of work on online challenges recently that had numerous outputs again across our policies and the way that we designed our features, and actually we published our findings online, and I encourage everyone to look at them. But one of the things that we did was that we saw an opportunity when young people were searching for content that we don't allow on our platform, for example, the Blackout Challenge, rather than just giving them a blank screen, we could take that moment to deliver some really important information to meet that need, that curiosity, with factual information. So now if you search for Blackout, rather than no results returned, which of course has always been our position, you now see a small PSA that says, these challenges are potentially dangerous. If you'd like to learn more, click here. And then we point them towards our 4-step process for critical thinking activation, which is that we encourage young people to stop, to think, to decide, and then to act. And then in relation again to dangerous challenges, we have just done a global project, in fact, on safety videos, where we work with creators, again, trying to sort of meet the needs of young people, to hear from people that they are interested in and like, rather than me, for example, trying to work with creators in different markets that can deliver safety messages around, for example, dangerous challenges, and the need to, as I say, be thoughtful about what you see, and ensuring that if you can properly assess the risk, and also respond appropriately if you see that there are potential dangers. And the videos that we created were, as I say, global and covered lots of different markets. But in Europe, we had videos and creators in France and in Germany and in Italy. I think the last thing I would say, because I'm conscious of time, is that we really want to make sure that we are bringing young people into the creation process when we develop our digital literacy solutions. We know that if products are child-led rather than adult assumed, they are absolutely going to work better and meet those young people's needs. I have yet to come away from a conversation with a young person without having had a view challenge, being given a great idea that TikTok can steal, or to be more thoughtful about an issue that I perhaps have made, apply some of my own preconceived ideas to. So two ways that has manifested recently for TikTok is parenting tips that we asked young people across Europe to develop. The question we asked them was, what do you want from your practically perfect digital parent? How would you like them to help you in the digital environment? We know, I'm a parent myself, we know that parents are given large manuals about how to use every platform that their child is using, and are frankly struggling under the weight of those myriad manuals. So how could we work with young people to try and sort of make a bite-sized piece of advice that all parents could benefit from? And those young people were fantastic. They gave us some really good top tips, things like help me understand the rules, be there for me when things go wrong, respect my privacy, and others. And actually parents have really welcomed those tips, because whilst obviously they're not a full substitute for our family pairing tools or under deep dives on our settings, parents are really busy, and if we can give them a sense that their parenting instincts that they are much more used to and much more confident applying in the offline world, if they can apply those instincts in the online world, then they can be a really great ally for their young people, because we know that having an adult in your life that will that you trust and that you can turn to, whether that be a parent, a carer, a teacher, is a critical and a wonderful safety tool online. And then in terms of co-creation, the other thing that we have done recently around well-being is work with young people again across Europe to crowdsource brilliant ideas about self-regulation, because digital literacy, whilst we want everybody to come to our platform with a sense of what it means to be a good digital citizen and also to understand how to navigate our platform safely, we know that developmentally there are some aspects of your digital life that will continue to be learning moments for all teenagers, and in fact for adults too. So in relation to screen time, we know that self-regulation is something that young people will particularly struggle with. So we have built some screen time management tools with young people that have specifically met their needs for innovative solutions. The first is that they really wanted information. So I think it goes to digital literacy. Knowledge is power. They wanted to know how much time they were spending online, specifically at what times of day, and they wanted to have a daily metric on that. So we've met that need, and we've also asked them for their views on a session duration timer, which is something that they were really keen on as well. So I do think that there is an aspect of media literacy, which is the critical things that you need to know to start your journey. But I also think that learning is a continuous journey, and if we can help our young people to be mindful and to reflect on how they're using platforms and the experiences that they've had, that is also a really useful tool, because we know that children, adults as well, are not fully formed, and we should anticipate that in our digital literacy strategies. So that's a really whistle-stop tour of some of the things that we're thinking about at TikTok when it comes to digital literacy, but I'll hand back to you.
Thanks very much, Alexandra. Really interested, and I think what you said, knowledge is power. I think that is sort of the key thing, and this brings me to Anna. You're working in the member states. Really, you see the situation on the ground, and that sort of brings also different sets of challenges. And I'd like to ask you to just tell us a bit more about that, and also about the role that the National Safety Internet Centres play in this regard.
Firstly, it's really nice to say it's good to be here in person instead of only am I well seen and heard. It's really nice. Thank you, John, for your very nice words about safer internet centers. And as June said, we try to approach the internet safety context from many different sides. We do education and information campaigns. We help kids by having helplines. We help kids also fighting with illegal content, having hotline. And today we were asked to share with you some our recent thoughts and recent struggles that we face, and then in a discussion, probably we will go deeper into different actions that we do. But first of all, I would like to share with you that today the big issue, the well-being and safety of children is very strongly associated with a war in Ukraine, especially for countries in our region, for Poland, but also for countries close to us. And the war very much defines now struggles. Some of them are completely new, but some of them are just on an unprecedented scale. And for example, one of those struggles is disinformation campaigns that we face really a lot now, and fake news, harmful content related to the warfare. These are the contents that children and young people might have contact really every day. So this is something that we have to respond very fast by educational and responsive actions. And just to tell you how important it is now for kids, is that we've done a competition for our youth panelists to be able to select one to go in October for the Safer Internet Forum to take part in the International Youth Panel. And we asked the young people to prepare very short, like 3-minute statements on some chosen topic. And all of them have chosen disinformation and fake news, not internet addiction, not, I don't know, cyberbullying. Each of these speeches were about disinformation, so it really opened our eyes how big problem is it for kids at the moment. And also another struggle, big struggle for us, is to work on relations, is to give help to kids who came to Poland. We have lots of refugee kids now in Poland, in Polish schools in last few months. We had about 200,000 kids learning in our schools. So you can imagine, and they came almost in few weeks. And what we need, we have to work on empathy, we have to work on relations, because what happens in schools, it will go then to the internet. So we have to work very strongly now to prevent internet hate, to prevent cyberbullying, to give as much help as we can to those kids that really need it, but also to kids in Poland, to teach them how to react, how to give support. As a Polish Safer Internet Center, we try also to give response to these needs. We hired now in our helpline consultants with the Ukrainian language. So we have both consultants, both psychologists that can respond to the needs in a helpline for kids, but also in a helpline for adults. Because we have two separate lines, so teachers but also parents can call us and ask for help with some internet issues. We also try to involve Ukrainians to our actions, the actions that the Polish Safer Internet Center organized. So we always provide our conferences now with Ukrainian translation. We invite kids to our events. Now in June we had a big conference. It's called the Digital Youth Forum. It's done by young people for young people. So we have also the panelists, the speakers are young people, and we invited really big amount of Ukrainian teenagers learning now in Poland, and we also they joined also online. We also try to involve teachers, Polish teachers, into those topics. We want them to be more prepared with resources to talk with kids about disinformation, to talk with kids about hate prevention and so on. For years, also today, very much, but for years, the key element of the activities of Safer Internet Center was also the involvement of young people into our actions. We have our youth panel since 2010. We work with them very strongly. Recently, of course, in response to the European Youth Year, and also it's so much strengthened in the new version of the strategy, we significantly intensified our work with young people. We consult with them each materials, each resources that we want to address. Our youth panelists are about between 13 and 17 years old, and they are really, really crucial for us. And just to share with you some recent thoughts from them, because I think it's really interesting. It's like 2 weeks ago, we've asked them what kind of webinars we should prepare for them to the autumn, what topics they would like us to cover. And first of all, they said they would like to have a webinar on how to build relationship at school to better counteract online hate. So this is what they want to talk about. They want us also to teach them how to deal with this information, of course, how to play online and not to get addicted. It was something really important to us, that they are so aware of this problem and they want us to help them. How to learn well and effectively, because they feel like today's technology and smartphones distract them. Also, you see how aware, really aware they are on the problems that they face. So of course we will try in our next webinars, next meetings, workshops for them to cover those issues. The time of pandemic, because we know what we went through last 2 years, was also a time of growing pressure on young people, because as we know, they were completely closed at home. The increase of the internet was very significant, and also very significant was their being on the social media and growing pressure on how popular they are, how they look. Also, the risky behavior increased, including things like sexting, for example. So in response to these threats, we also organized a few campaigns dedicated to these topics. We had one campaign about self-sexual generated materials. Another was about the body neutrality. This is also the topic that we now want to really focus on, facing those challenges that come from social media. And we also engaged the young influencers in a campaign to show the life behind filters, which is also very important for young people to know that it's all very often produced. Having this occasion, thank you TikTok for cooperation, because we cooperated a lot for these two campaigns, and especially with getting right audience to our actions. The last time is also an increased prevention of the sexual abuse. I told you about the campaign, but also we are very involved now in the regulatory practices that happens, initiatives that happens now. They are coordinated by the Ministry of Justice, but Polish Safer Internet Center is extremely present in all those actions, especially our hotline, having their very important perspective. And last but not least, we see a growing need to involve parents in activities related to online safety. We've been doing it for a long time, but now we think that we have to strengthen our actions in this field. Somehow, I think, being a parent as well, I think that during the pandemic, parents a little bit get closer to the online lives of their kids. They could see it a little bit closer, what happens, but it's still not enough. Much more must be done. And we have 2 advisory groups at the moment. We have consultation committee, which is advisory board for the Polish Safer Internet Center. We have their institutions, governmental, non-governmental, NGOs, and industry, of course, as well, TikTok as well. We have a youth panel, so one of most important, our consultation group, but now we also want to have one more. We will have in coming weeks, advisory board consists on parents, and we hope that it will help us best define their needs in terms of topics and means of reaching, because what is most challenging is to reach parents, as we all know, working in this field, and as you said, parents are very busy and not easy to be reached. And we all know that without aware adults, we will never have well protected kids. So I think I will finish with this sentence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I think you highlighted the role that parents play, and I think this is also something. And ISFA represents the video game companies, and video games are often really one of the first ways young children get in touch with technology, and there's possibly also some arguments involved there on the parental side. And I'd like to ask you now to just tell us a bit more about ISFA's action in this regard, and maybe especially you could touch on the role that and the ways in which you support parents as well in raising digitally literate children.
Thank you, Federica, and also very nice to hear very excellent overview from June on what is currently the various initiatives, and also from the insight from the Polish Safer Internet Center. So video games are a creative sector, so it's a creative interactive medium. So it's different. It's not social media. It's really that creative experience. Europe has a lot of game developers all over Europe that are creating these productions that are sometimes enjoyed for years, that people stay with, they continue to play with, they pick it up as a child, and then they continue actually with the same game 20 years down the road. So perhaps first, to avoid that we get stuck in stereotypes, the average video game player in Europe is 31 years old, and the largest age group is 45 to 65 years old. And 45% of Europe's video game players are women, and about 50% of the European population plays video games. Of course, many children, they also play video games as their favorite pastime, and this is why our sector has a very strong and long-standing commitment to minor protection. And I do think that we have many best practices to share, because we have been active on this since a very long time. Perhaps first an introductory remark on how video games can also be a powerful medium to convey digital literacy and empower children. So play in itself, whether that is physical or digital, that allows to react, to create. It's also about children's right to play, to make decisions, and to participate through collaboration with our other players. It can be you build a thing, you together go to a next level, or you make some kind of achievement. But of course, play, you always need to have a balance in play, whether that is physical and digital play. A project that ISFE is engaged in is to use video games in the classroom to do two things actually, to help to upskill teachers in their digital literacy, and to see how video games can be used as a tool in order to supplement the traditional curricula. And we also see through this program that also it has a positive impact in the classroom in order to convey digital literacy skills such as ICT skills, problem solving, teamwork, etc. And we actually do this project since many years together with Hans organization, the European SchoolNet. In that sense, we do also think that recent action from the European Commission, such as the Digital Education Action Plan, the recent Council conclusions on blended learning, they are actually really important in order to foster that digital literacy through education. As a second remark, I think that the COVID-19 pandemic has been an eye-opener for many. And also especially how video games can actually contribute to digital well-being, also on behalf of WHO. Many people, they turn to video games to connect with others, to simply de-stress, have fun, do their educational chores. Parents also started to play with their kids more. And we think that is important, and we now see how the value of video games in that respect is more recognized. And we have also recently seen some very interesting academic studies conducted during the pandemic to show how games were a source of simply stress relief and well-being, of course. The last point is our commitment to how we empower children. And that cannot be done with empowering parents in how one engages with video games. So parents and children, we think that they need to go hand in hand in the digital pastime. And as an industry, and as also Alexandra said, we do have a duty to support them in best achieving this. Through the PEGI system, which is there for now 20 years, this industry has quite a unique experience. In the area of minor protection, PEGI is the video game sector self and co-regulatory system supplementing existing legislation. It was set up by the support of the European institutions in 2003, and Dirk Bosmans from PEGI, the PEGI organization, will, I think, after this panel, talk about the PEGI system. Another thing is player and parental control tools. These allow to manage access to age-appropriate games. It allows to manage playtime. It allows to manage online interaction or even to disable online interaction. It allows to manage spend. The first controls in our sector was launched back in 2003. And I think we're quite happy to see that copying things can also be seen, if it's not a copyright infringement, it can also be seen as I would say, as a reward that you have done something good. And we now see that similar parental control tools is now being set up by other industries. I think I saw the Google Family Link in 2017. We now see Netflix. We now see Meta. We now see, I mean, there are very often regular announcements around that. They may not exactly do the same things as the parental control tools in the video game sector, but I think it's important to recognize that these are there. So education and awareness, that is key in order to gain digital literacy and also video game literacy, for instance, for parents that may not play video games. So ISFE engaged with our network of national trade associations across Europe in education and awareness campaigns. Last year, we also launched a website, an initiative, a campaign. It's called Seize the Controls. Go and have a look at that. It's on our website, and there are very practical tips for parents in how to engage in conversation with your kids about video game play, how to manage that, how to set rules, how to have a discussion with them about that, and first and foremost also to encourage parents to actually play with their children so they realize what is this digital environment like that their children are involving in. The last point is perhaps data points. We spend quite a lot of time in collecting data points because that is necessary to guide and to inform our action. Are parents aware of PEGI, for example? Do children spend money in the game? Are parents supervising their children? How do they do this? Do they prefer to have agreements? Do they prefer to use parental control tools, etc.? And we believe that is really needed in order to feed into how we as a sector decide on further action in order to ensure that we do have a responsible gameplay. And I also want to say that we reached out to the Safer Internet Centers recently to see how we can better partner together across Europe in order to make sure that the Safer Internet Centers also have these various tips and tools that may be a little bit specific to the video game sector as well. So we welcome those partnerships a lot, and we hope to broaden these in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. And on to our last speaker, Hans, last but not least. Excuse me?
Save the best to last.
Save the best to last, indeed. No, we've had a number of initiatives outlined today, you know, covering parents, looking at involving young children, but schools and teachers and just the educational sector in general, I think, also play a very big role, and that is obviously an organisation that you're involved with, and I'd like to just ask you to tell us more about how you go about cooperating with this specific subset of stakeholders.
Okay, thank you very much. So maybe just to start by saying, so in a way I'm sitting here with two complementary hats on. So on the one hand, I will talk a bit about the work we do at European SchoolNet as part of our digital citizenship line of work. So it is about digital skills, digital literacy, online safety, child rights in a digital world. And we do that work together with a network of ministries of education. So that's really specifically linked to the formal education context. But we also run a number of projects, often on behalf of the European Commission. And within that context, the Parental for Kids initiative is by far the most important one, for me at least, in terms of the digital citizenship activities. So if you want more information about that, go to parental.kids.eu. I think it's a bit of the main attempt to translate the big strategy into concrete action, and we do so also by coordinating this European network of safe internet centers. So it will be no surprise that I would like to start by saying that and really underlying the strategic importance of having, on the one hand, the vision and also part of the resources at European level in terms of moving these kind of activities forward, but then we really try to work very closely with the centers in the member states on the ground. So I think we've picked it up before. So they are the eyes and the ears, they are the ones who are really doing the really important work. And I think when Anna was talking about the current crisis in Poland linked to what is happening in Ukraine, so we can develop a lot of policies, but if you really want to bring that to practice, you need people on the ground, and you need people having these difficult conversations with children, young people, teachers, and parents. So just to say that that's really important, and that we as European Schoolnet, we feel very privileged to be part. I think we've been driving a lot of this implementation exercise for many years now, and we do so also in close partnerships with many of the industry players who are sitting in this panel, but also around the different tables in this meeting. I could talk a lot about the positive things and the success stories, but I decided to say if you want to read about the good stories, go to betterinternetforkids.eu, and I want to talk a bit about the challenges, and I think the main point I want to make is that while we can be proud about some of the things we have achieved, it's really an ongoing process, and I don't think we will ever be there. I think that's a bit of the main point. And I want to tell the story based on a bit more of an anecdotal experience, a bit of a concrete story. So just for background, I've been at European Schoolnet for more than 10 years. Before I did research on media literacy education. I grew up in Flanders, Belgium, and I also did research on that. And I also have a child who's part of the formal education system, so it's a context I know pretty well. And I do remember 10 years ago, there was this kind of momentum in the sense of like finally people acknowledged that things like media literacy are becoming important. It was being picked up in policies. It ended up in the curriculum. In Flanders, we had a knowledge center of media literacy. In Flanders, we have also a very strong Safe Internet Center doing very similar work to what Anna was talking about. And last month, I read in the mainstream newspaper that there was this big research being published based on 5,000 pupils being surveyed. And it's talking about the state of play, but also how educators, how schools are doing within this context. And I was really curious to find out because I was very hopeful and very positive because I know how much good work is happening on the ground. I think what was really interesting from the report, so there's a lot of nice visuals and graphs and findings, but they have this, what they call digital puberty graph. So I think some people won't be entirely happy with the terminology, but basically what they're trying to do is show the kind of social media, but more generally digital media that children in primary education start using, and then they go on in secondary education. And the main point they are making is that actually the experiences you have in first, but especially in second grade of primary education, it's quite similar to the experiences we see in secondary education. So even primary school children, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, they are using almost the same social media apps as we would expect from the teenagers. So I think we all know the story also from different countries. I think Alexander, others will know the graph. So TikTok is on top, but the numbers go up quite quickly. So when they're 7, 8, 36% say they are on TikTok. When they're 9, 10, it's 66%. By the time they're 11, 12, it's 78%. So that's quite high number. So it's well before the so-called digital age of consent. And I guess it's putting into question a bit also some of the discussions we've had this morning. So I think there's a long way to go talking about age-appropriate services. If we see that if you ask the children in terms of what they are doing, that's what's happening. But I was hopeful because I was thinking, okay, they're also asking, are you talking about this in school? Are you talking about your parents? But I was a bit disappointed, to be honest. So I think there are some very positive points if you look at, for example, secondary education. By now, 80% of the people say we do talk about social media. 70% say we talk about cyberbullying, and indeed, this is one of the topics that we've been talking about for a really long time. But knowing that even the primary school students are on social media, you would expect that those conversations start taking place also in primary schools. But that's not happening. Like more than half of the primary school students have never talked about this. More than half of the pupils in primary secondary education do not talk about games in a school environment. More than half of the primary school students have never talked about cyberbullying. And if you then look at secondary education, I think if there's one topic that we would hope that gradually people are comfortable to talk about it, it's something like sexting, which is really important for the teenagers, and it's really where we want them to learn, to exchange, to have open, critical reflections. And there again, more than half of them did not talk about these topics in a school environment. And that's in a country, so I'm not saying Belgium is the best of the class, but that's in a country where I think things are going quite well in terms of having the right instruments in place, having the right resources, and so forth. And the same is true for the parents. So there's a lot of rules. There's not so much participation from children and young people when these rules are being set. There are conversations taking place, but for sure it's not coming close to some of the child right ideals we have in mind when we talk about children's rights in a digital world. So what are for me then the key takeaway points I would like to take out of that? So one, I think again, I think we can be proud about the progress which we have made over the last years. I think over the last decade, a lot have changed. I remember a lot of conversations trying to explain why media literacy is important. We're not there any longer. I think when you talk to people about the things we do, all the people in this room, you get attention, people acknowledge, they say, yes, this is really important, but it's quite of a challenge. And there is a lot of professionalism, like name me any topic, issue you would like to work on. I can find you an excellent resource. But you also need to be realistic in terms of implementation, in terms of getting the message to the pupils. And I think we also should become a bit more critical in terms of how we try to measure, evaluate it. So by now, it's no longer good enough to say, yes, it's in the curriculum. We need to look at what's really happening in the classroom. Are the teachers being taught to deal with it in the right way? If so, when does it happen? If it happens in teacher training, early teacher training, it will take a lot of time before all of the people who are currently there will end up being replaced. So in addition, we need all kinds of professional development. We need to think about assessment. We need to think about how do we evaluate the results of these things being taught in a school environment. And we need to make sure that the resources we have, that they continue to be of high quality and up to date. So it's not just about continuing the good work, it's about becoming more ambitious and trying to do even more, because we know that so many important conversations which should take place are currently not taking place. And I think it's not only the education community that needs to be, and I think we as a society that needs to be more ambitious. I think we also need to expect the same, for example, from industry. So I think there are a lot of really great initiatives out there. But then we also need to ask the question, like, is it having a difference? How many people are using these resources? Is it having an impact on how they are behaving on social media? And also, can we get a bit more transparency in terms of these kind of figures? So it's good to have a high quality resource, but please tell us as well, like, is it being used? Is it having an impact? And I think that's the kind of transparency we need also to hold companies accountable, not only in terms of age-appropriate services, but also in terms of the good education efforts that they are working on. And then last but not least, I do think, and I think it's a bit in line with what we've all been saying, so we need to find ways to more actively involve children and young people into the conversation. So when we organize a forum, and it's largely due to requirements from the Commission, but we got used to it and now we really like it and we would never do it differently. So don't ask me, ask one of our youth panelists to sit here, because she could actually say exactly what I've said, but then in a much more interesting, eloquent, exciting manner. And also try to involve them in that kind of evaluation process. So if you do things in a classroom, ask them how they feel about it if companies are doing stuff. And I know a lot of companies are involving young people in those cycles. But indeed, let them help to decide what is the best way forward.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Hans. I think you raised some interesting challenges, which can also take us now into the debate. And please, if you are in the room or if you are online and you'd like to raise a point, please do so. But June, I'd like to turn to you first. Hans mentioned that there is sort of, this issue with that there's a number of policies which are being developed by the European Commission, but maybe not all of them really arrive in the member states. Obviously, education is of national competence, so there is the Commission cannot be there everywhere all the time. But like, what's the Commission's thinking of how to maybe coordinate better with the member states in order to improve that? And then secondly, also, how can we make sure that there is policies for 17-year-olds may need to be different than the ones that we have for 9-year-olds? So if you could sort of touch upon those 2 points, that would be...
Sure, I will try. So definitely, I think as I sort of outlined in the opening remarks, there are a lot of different initiatives going on across the Commission. involving the member states very closely, like the Digital Education Action Plan. They are bringing out guidelines imminently, I think, on cyberbullying, for example, to try and help teachers across Europe. And that's been designed with an expert group from across Europe of practitioners and experts in the field. So there are initiatives going on like that in all the different sectors, really trying to involve the member states. But yes, in the formal education sector, of course, as you say, it's member states' competence. But I think there is a general acceptance, as Hans said, the level of discussion has really changed. It's not a question of if the Commission should be saying we think this is important, maybe you want to think about teaching it. It's really now about how can we be effective, what works, how do we measure it, how do we know if it's successful or not. And that certainly echoes what we heard from the children, the young people in the conversation last summer. And it always impresses me when you talk to them that they really do look to school still, I naively thought, oh, they'll all learn everything from TikTok. And I'm sure a lot of them do learn a lot of stuff from TikTok. But actually, they really do turn to teachers as trusted adults, and they expect that, and they feel that the teachers are not able themselves yet to give them the skills that they need. So the work that we're doing across the Commission, but is also going on in the member states as well, at national level, to actually train the teachers to make them confident, to give them the confidence as well as the skills to tackle these topics. As Hans said, we see there's a big gap there still in the lived reality of kids. And although we're very proud, for example, through our Safer Internet Centres, we reach about 30 million people a year. That is a big achievement. But there's 450 million people in Europe. There's a lot of people that we're still not reaching. And so, through the big strategy, we're looking again at running cycles of big campaigns on media literacy, preparing MOOCs for teachers, because there's no one-size-fits-all solution. I think all the bits of the jigsaw puzzle, all these different initiatives will reach different strands of the adult population, and we've got to just keep, try and make those as effective as possible, but also join the dots and make sure that the member states are on board. And I've totally forgotten the second question you asked me.
Sorry,
My
no
goldfish
worries.
brain.
That's great. We have a question first, and I'll turn to you in a minute. But the second question was just how to make sure that we sort of are we doing a differentiated approach? A 9-year-old will need something different than a 17-year-old.
Definitely. And this is really where we, certainly as the Commission, rely on the fantastic work of the Safer Internet Centres and the resources that are then pooled together on the portal, so that we look at resources that are age specific. As one of the speakers said, this morning, if we know something is going to be used by 5 to 10-year-olds, that's got to be different than what's aimed at 16, 17, 18-year-olds. And, really, I think the work, the resources that are prepared by our Safer Internet Centres, who are the ones going into the schools at those different ages, and having those different conversations with children, can prepare child-friendly versions. So the Commissioner mentioned our child-friendly version. For better or worse, that is a one-size-fits-all. That's also a question of resources and a bit of time to sort of get this, but it was prepared with children. And also, I'd mention that actually having child-friendly material also makes stuff much more accessible, in fact, to adults. Because sometimes at the EU, especially, we're very good at Eurospeak and we're not very good at human speak. So I would put a little plug in there for all of our documents having child-friendly versions with the inverted commas. So.
Yeah, it's actually a good thing you just raised, this child-friendly language of communicating. And I know we have an in-audience question, but Alexandra, I'd like to turn to you first, because I think TikTok, obviously we've heard is an app used by children as well as others. And how do you is there a way specifically that you ensure that the content that you put out, in order to, some of the things you have raised, that they work for the people that see it in that moment? And do you sort of also, take into account to have this child-friendly language and present this information in a way where it makes sense to different audiences, possibly?
Yeah, absolutely. So June is right. I think everything should be child friendly. There is a campaign in the UK called Plain English, and I think that's what we aspire to in all of our writing and all of the way that we discuss these issues. Parents are I think I'm a little weary of the concept of children being digital natives and parents being technophobes. You know, we're not there now, which is great, but I do think that the easier we can make things for young people, but also parents, the better. But in ways in which we're surfacing or trying to reach those young people specifically. So when we speak to young people and we ask them how they learn, how they look for things, etc., they're not really very text-based. They are audiovisual learners, as a 13-year-old once told me, and I thought that was amazing piece of insight. But you know, they want to learn through video content, which makes obviously creates a huge opportunity for TikTok because we are a short-form video platform. So how can we really lean into that? So again, as I was saying about the safety videos that we're producing, rather than it being the way that it would change our strategy is rather than it being text-based and, you know, worst case scenario, text-based, web-based, off-platform, best case scenario, language specific, obviously, there's a really important one, but also audiovisual, short form, typically authentically sort of TikTok-y, and that's something that's a little bit tricky for us because often what we're describing is quite a serious topic, but at the same time, we don't want it to make it feel like a PSA because that might alienate young people. So how do we balance, you know, creating content that's authentically TikTok, which tends to be sort of funny, irreverent, a bit cheeky, perhaps, with the need to, you know, be talking about difficult subjects. And we've kind of checked that point actually with parents and teens as well, and they both sort of said, just do it TikTok style. If that's what's going to resonate, then go for that. So, and then of course, as I said before, we're using our creators as well. So, you know, I am not listened to in my own house, let alone on a global platform by the many young people who use TikTok. So when we're trying to recruit creators, we're trying to think about who will be a meaningful advocate for whatever we're trying to achieve. So in Germany, for example, we used TikTok's most popular creator, who's a magician, who used describing the way that he might put together a trick that has a sort of element of danger to then sort of critically unpick that moment and describe for the young people in German how he's thoughtful about creating a moment that may look very spontaneous and look very straightforward, but actually it requires a huge amount of planning, skills, expertise, and technical support behind the scenes. So we're trying to make it interesting, we're trying to make it engaging, but at the same time using our voice. And in terms of transparency, I think this is a really good point. You know, the videos themselves are on our platform, and you can look and see how many times they've been viewed. We actually made a decision to proactively serve them in our algorithm. So rather than them just being published on the creator accounts and then you find them if you're watching that creator or that creator's video gets served to you, we made a proactive decision to serve them to every under 18 in those markets, so that we knew that we felt confident that everybody had been given an opportunity to look at it once. So please do take a look at the viewing figures for that. I think that's useful. But there is, of course, more that we can do when it comes to transparency. And I think the DSA is going to be a good motivator for understanding what we need in terms of transparency, and certainly the age-appropriate design code of conduct, which I think conversations will be led by June and her team, and others in the Commission. Again, I think there's a really interesting element to the opportunities within the code for thinking about the efficacy and impact of digital literacy strategies on our platform.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Yes, please. Could I please ask you to state your name and who you work for, and then also if you could keep your question short, as we're nearly at the
Learning
end.
from
Thank you.
history, yes. My name is Larissa. I'm representing here today the Lego Group. Apologies for not standing before. It's due to a health issue, not a sign of disrespect. We're very grateful for the European Commission's leadership of including that pillar on empowerment. We think it's critical. And we're grateful also for all the work of getting children's voices in the work leading to the strategy. What I wanted to ask is, so education, awareness, and monitoring impact are key. But how can we deliver those to the ones outside of the formal education setting, or to the ones who have limited experiences of or access to online experiences and digital services? And how can we monitor impact there? Thank you.
Thank you very much. maybe would you like to take that question, being on the ground? One of you?
It's a difficult question, actually.
Yes, it is a difficult question.
Because
There's another question.
maybe you have any.
I mean, Hans,
Yeah,
you can go
Maybe
first
Hans,
if you'd
maybe
like.
you know,
Yeah.
because
So it's a challenge. I think
Yes.
that's established, but that doesn't mean we don't need
You're a
to.
challenges guy, so that's
Yeah. I'm not sure what that means, but I'll just give two examples. So one comes directly out of the Big Plus strategy. So I think there's an acknowledgement that we need to broaden and enrich the partners we work with. So, for example, I know in the UK, post-Brexit, but in the UK they have huge partnerships with football clubs for Safe Internet Day, and it's just one example. If you find these entry points into some of the topics we would like to discuss, it might help to reach those people that you may normally not reach through the formal education system. So that's one example. I want to give one other example. So I think there's a whole variety of vulnerable groups, however you want to define them, and we should not lump them together. But for example, we've done quite a bit of work also in the past on special needs and learners with various types of disabilities. And what is important is that there are existing networks and existing experts and people doing their thing, but often they need awareness about the online safety aspects of what they do. So I think it is about building new partnerships and being creative in finding new ways into the various informal systems which do exist. And I think it's on one hand for safety net centers and organizations to think out of the box and to be creative, but then also for others to realize that that's easier said than done. So it's quite a intensive process which takes a lot of time, and but that's.
I could add also the importance of such big actions, like, for example, Safer Internet Day, because it's the action that we are really able to reach very broad audiences. We cooperate a lot with media, and we have a huge media understanding for this initiative for last years, and also cooperation with industry as well. So with different, like Hans said, the cooperation with different stakeholders, I think that make it possible, and with different foundations that take care of those groups that you listed. This is not one simple factor that you can use.
Thank you very much. It's I hope that answered your question. It's definitely a mix of different factors. Over to you, please. Could I ask you to state your name and who you work for, please?
Andy Vermoot again from the World Council for Public Diplomacy and Community Dialogue. I had a question to two people of the audience. Responsible companies and platforms, child-friendly platforms, this one thing, and I'm aware that they're working for the good of the people, but the penal code in a lot of countries is not following. The people who use social media platforms pull the triggers, abusers. Sometimes we see that there is not a follow-up on the national penal codes in the countries. Should there not be a sort of European coordinated penal code, that there is a sort of interaction between the member states to have a better follow-up of the perpetrators of online abuse also of children?
I think that's probably a question that doesn't really relate to digital literacy overall. Maybe in the next panel, which I know will discuss the actual child sexual abuse material online proposal, maybe it will be more. Yeah, okay. But it's about the sort of criminal liabilities around harmful acts carried out online, and this panel sort of focuses on digital literacy. Okay, so your question is sort of how to reach the perpetrators. Is there anyone who'd like to?
Maybe I can just say a couple of comments on that. Obviously, it's not specific digital literacy, so let me just retune into this. I think, as EU-wide, we obviously do have some common standards or some common not word definition, some common criminal acts that are recognised as criminal acts across the EU. Child sexual abuse being one, the directive from 2011. We have illegal hate speech, which is also xenophobic and racist hate speech, which has led to the Code of Practice on illegal hate speech, which has actually proven very successful also with the help of industry. Also, sadly, really sort of accelerated through some, tragic incidents being live streamed and shared online. What I really welcome this year from the Commission is that to that list of crimes, we are adding also gender-based violence, which is also including non-consensual sharing of intimate images, which is being deemed as gender-based violence because, although not always, the vast majority of people concerned by it are women. And that also covers, therefore, teenagers whose sexted images could then be shared further without their consent. So there are some areas where there is this minimum standard of saying this has to be recognised as a crime across the EU. And then it's up normally to the member states to then turn that into their criminal law. I agree there aren't many of them, but there definitely are a whole set of actions, and child sexual abuse is definitely one of those.
Thank you.
Hope
Thank
that
you very
helps.
much. There's maybe, we touched sort of already on the topic of the digital divide, but I think given that just a couple of days ago the European Accessibility Act entered into force, and now really all digital services need to be made accessible for everyone, and sort of a question that I'd like to have to really, maybe Anne, if you'd like to go first, but how can we make sure to include really all the children, so not just possibly the one, basically including children with disabilities into our digital literacy efforts, which is obviously a harder, a much more difficult endeavour than other children as well, just to reach them as well.
No, thank you, and that's obviously a very important point when you look at the number of the European population that is enabled or disabled. So in our sector, we have seen that video games is actually very much of a force for good because it can allow people that are enabled to interact physically, etc., through certain specifically adapted devices, etc. They can actually play and just play like anyone. And I think we have some very good examples of that has really helped people that are highly disabled to actually enjoy a leisure moment and just play like anyone. Among our members, that are several that are investing a lot in making either the coding process to make sure that the video games are accessible in terms of what is coming out and how you can access them with subtitles, sounds, etc. It's also accessibility at device level. I know that Xbox and Microsoft, they have done a thing called an adaptive controller, which has, I don't know, I think it's about 20 different entries where you can just plug in with any device, and then you can actually you can play with your elbow. You can there are lots of work going on into that space, and that's important because play, it's part of culture, it's part of being inclusive, etc. So indeed, that is something that is important for us, and where the sector will continue to invest in and to develop further.
Can I just add to that? Sorry, since my unit is also responsible for the Web Accessibility Directive, sorry, okay. Not the European Accessibility Act, but we work very closely with our colleagues responsible for that as well. And just to say to everyone in the room, think accessible. There is no excuse to have non-accessible PDFs. There is no excuse to not make products accessible by default. We're talking about safety by design and default. We should have accessibility by design and default. And if you don't want to do it to let people share these fantastic and enabling shared experiences that digital technology offers, they are a huge market. We have, depending on the definitions, we have somewhere between 90 to 100 million persons with disabilities, up to, if you include dyslexics and people who have reading problems, up to 150 million people in Europe. That is a big chunk of the population. and they are all too often excluded from things like terms and conditions, and this is why having child-friendly text actually helps a lot more of the general population. So please, that's my plea. Go for accessibility. Try using something with your eyes closed. Can you use a keyboard? Can you use screen readers if you activate them? There are some great progresses in technology for accessibility, but it really just needs that thinking about a diverse user base of digital tools and products. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're nearly coming to the end, and we have a keynote speech after as well before heading into a well-deserved coffee break. And really, I'd like to just ask sort of everyone maybe one last concluding question. And that question would be, can we have digital literacy as a school subject, just like maths and English? And what would that, would that help? Would that solve all the issues, or? Yeah, maybe Hans, if you'd like to go first, and I'll.
So I think for 30 years now, academics have been discussing should it be a separate subject or cross-curricular. So there's downsides and benefits both ways. So of course, this is part of society. So across everything we do, we should bring this digitally literate mindset to what we want to achieve. So it does make sense to do it across the curriculum, because if you're talking about geography or history or mathematics, in all these contexts, in a way, it makes sense to be literate from a more digital point of view, because it's having increasing implications. But then at the same time, there is the risk that if you make it cross-curricular, that it becomes something for everyone, and therefore no one really does it. So there is a bit of this ongoing tension, and I think we also need to be realistic. There's a lot of pressure on the curriculum already. I think there's many countries who struggle already to revise what is currently there. If you ask me, I would say we need both, but being realistic, that might not happen. So yeah.
Yeah. All right, Anna.
It's another difficult question, but I think somehow some years ago we divided to offline and online, but now children does not divide it any longer. They feel the world like one thing, more harmonized. So maybe the idea, like Hans said, to do it cross-curriculum, because then we can implement technology to all the topics that kids learn, to history, how to learn biology, how to learn geography, using these digital competences. It's like we talk to kids, I don't know, giving smartphone, for example, to a young child. We say, okay, using this technology, you can communicate, you can write, you can pay bills, and so on. So we try to implement this technology into life. And maybe this, but we should do it really well, really think how we do it, and do it really effectively. So yes, maybe that will be this drive the answer, but maybe this answer will change in a few coming years. And if I have only one sentence, I only would like to say that the work that we do locally, the member states does, get a great support from the international network. So Hans, thanks for the coordination of the network, because we really cooperate a lot. We can benefit from our resources. We can benefit from our knowledge. And these 2 years of pandemic also showed that it's really great. And thanks the Commission for supporting this network.
Thank you very much. And Anna and Alexander, for you, slightly different question. If you could say it in just one sentence, just because we're running out of time. But what do you think is the number one thing that the industry needs to do in order to ensure digitally literate youngsters across Europe?
I'll give Alexander the benefit because she's online. So.
Okay. Sorry, same question to you, Alexandra. Sorry, then
sorry, you had me.
No worries.
You had me scrambling from my mute button. I really apologize. So we worked with a brilliant prevention scientist from Harvard University, and she taught me that digital literacy is most effective when we take a child-centered, holistic approach. So for me, that means speaking to young people and making sure that they are helping us develop the things that we think might help them. But then additionally, like not just having moments. Safer Internet Day is a brilliant moment, and we always want to be supportive of it. But digital literacy strategies need to be developed and delivered consistently across developmental stages, across all aspects of a child's life, whether that be through their parents in the home, whether it be in school, or whether whenever they're willing to listen to us, it be on a platform like TikTok. So I think that what I would say in terms of us is that we need to be consistent. We need to have a 5-year strategy. We need to be delivering it holistically and be really clear about what we're trying to achieve, and then let you know how we're doing.
Thank you very much. Anything to add to that, Anne?
I'll just be very brief and very boring. I don't think we can achieve digital literacy unless we first deal with the digital divide topic.
Yeah.
It's about inclusion, and everybody needs to have equal access to digital equipment, especially schools. That's not the case in Europe today. So I think yes, but we need also to fix that. Yeah.
Thank you. Any concluding remarks from the Commission?
No, just to say I totally agree with Anne, and I think in terms of digital divide, we've got to remember that it's not just connectivity, access to devices and to infrastructure in schools, it's also access to skills. And that we need to be sure that we're not just doing a one-size-fits-all, which I don't think any of us around the table are working on, but that we have to pay attention to the different needs of different types of children or different groups of children.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, thank you everyone also for your questions, and thank you to all of our panelists.